Today, I'm going to teach you how to play Neith. Except I'm not. Hyris is going to do that. Hyris has been releasing a bunch of guides lately, and I want to talk about them. We're going to use the Neith one as an example, and we'll hop right in here.
Welcome, gods and goddesses. Get started on the battleground of the gods with the Smite God tutorial for Neith.
Okay, we could say this part could be a bit more enthusiastic and less read of a script, but that's nitpicking. Let's go into the essence of the information here.
The Egyptian Weaver of Fate. Neith is one of the free playable hunters in Smite, and you can find her as the tutorial god. Her kit focuses on ranged attacks and physical damage. As a hunter, she applies high damage over time, which is great for taking down single targets or enemy structures, but be careful as hunters can be easy to kill.
Good advice so far. What you would want to tell a beginner about hunters in general.
Be sure to have map awareness, as her ultimate could score a major kill in the game.
And this is where it already gets kind of weird. Be sure to have map awareness. Sure, we are in the MOBA genre. Most of us will be able to work with the terminology map awareness. But why not just say, if this is aimed at new players, be sure to keep an eye on your map. Much more cohesive, much more comprehensive. Like, why make it into this specific wording that MOBA players use?
Neith's passive is Broken Weave. A Broken Weave appears at the last location that each enemy god dies. The Broken Weave gives her abilities secondary effects when used nearby.
Okay, if we're talking about secondary effects, then maybe it would be useful to tell you what those secondary effects are. I guess maybe it might still come up in the abilities, but I feel like that's something you would explain in the context of the passive immediately.
Neith's first ability is Spirit Arrow. Neith fires a shot that passes through everything. Each enemy hit takes damage and is rooted. If the Spirit Arrow hits a Broken Weave, the weave detonates, dealing additional damage and applying the root to all enemies in the area.
Alright, they actually explain that part. Good enough.
Neith's second ability is Unravel. Neith neatly unravels the world weaves, damaging all enemies in the target area, reducing their attack speed, and healing Neith for each enemy hit. Any broken weaves in the area are removed, healing Neith an additional amount.
Okay, they're explaining once again what the effect does exactly in terms of for the weave.
Neith's third ability is Backflip. Neith backflips through the air, creating a broken weave as she leaps while damaging and slowing enemies in the area in front of her. Neith's ultimate ability is World Weaver. Neith charges up and fires an arrow across the world, seeking its target through obstacles. Enemy gods take damage and are stunned. The arrow can be fired quicker for diminished results.
Diminished results. I mean, just again, why make it more complex than necessary? For less damage and less stun time. And that's it. That is literally everything that they're going to tell you about Neith. You know, you can nitpick as much as you want about the details of the information provided here, as I am doing. But really the big deal here is, why is this even a thing? All of the information provided in this tutorial are things that you could have gotten out of the game by just reading the ability description in-game. All of them. And most of them you probably would have found out by just using her kit once in jungle practice, or even in a normal game. I understand that you don't want to make a beginner guide too complex. And I'm somebody who specifically doesn't aim to make pure beginner guides because I find that those often require a lot of simplification that isn't necessarily easy to do, and that gets annoying for those who have played longer. But a little bit more than this, a little bit more effort behind what the guides can be would be great. I do understand that Hyris maybe doesn't want to do this part with other content creators because they've had their history of being burned by content creators and burning content creators, so maybe they figured we'd rather do things at our own pace on our own. But they could at least take advice from people who have made guides before and have figured it out and know what information to include and exclude depending on who you are targeting. These guides really don't do anything for anyone. For the more experienced players, they're way too little. For beginners, well, in parts they're almost too much. And on the other hand, they would have an easier time just reading it because then they could do it at their own pace and keep track better and remember everything. I think the idea of putting guides on the high risk channel in itself is great. I think information being provided to new players is fantastic, but it should be done in a format that's suited for that. I know that that comes with complication. I know that builds can get outdated, that leveling order can change, and that certain playstyles can change over time. But still, even if part of the video ends up being outdated, I would say there is more value to having that overall than having this. You could, for example, say that Neith benefits a lot from items that are focused on ability-based characters, so items that offer power and offer cooldown reduction, but can also utilize typical hunter items with more attack speed or penetration. That's something that you could then supplement with a few icons of items that have those stats, or just list the items, and those items will generally be good. If Devos or Bloodforge or Transcendence ends up being the meta item, is relatively irrelevant as long as you give players a base idea of what type of item they're looking for in the first place in order to have some power behind their attacks, instead of having them rush, for example, Odysseus bow or something like that. No one expects these guides to be perfect, and I'm sure that if you're targeting it at more experienced players, then you want to have someone who definitely looks deeper in those guides, and there would be a lot of competition where people would say, yeah, but somebody else made a guide on this that would be better, and blah, blah, blah. But that's not what this is. These are beginner guides. And I just find it very interesting that they're put at this super minimal effort when it wouldn't take much to make them just a little bit better. Just include some combat scenarios, some items, how to level the abilities, and some scenarios on how to use the abilities. Those things, generally speaking, will not change much over time. And if something like that drastically changes, then even this guide would not be useful anymore. If, for example, an interaction with an ability is completely changed, like for example the one and the weaves or something, then you'd have to redo the guide anyway. So there's no guarantee that it'll last forever in either scenario. Just my 2 cents, my rambling on this. And with that, thank you guys very much for watching. If you'd like to see more Smite content, and today I'm going to also make some Crucible content, then feel free to click the sub button and maybe the bell. I'd really appreciate that. And other than that, I see you for the next one later today. DukeSloth, out.